Hello you two. It's me, Foreign Master, and welcome back to another overly sarcastic productions reaction. So, it's a new trope talk, Prison Break. Depending on the movie, the Prison Break can be, at the very least, one of the more, exciting parts of the movie or show. I swear, I've been watching the new Superman show, My Adventures with Superman. I'm just thinking back, but I think they've just hit like 9 episodes. But there have been like 3 prison breaks in that show already, or 2 or 3 at the very least, if I'm remembering correctly. I mean, that kind of is a little absurd, don't you think? I mean, you're going back to the well fairly often, though. I guess that also could be counting the fact that Superman Clark is like a new thing, and then you have simultaneously all these freaky people using like. If the show is to be believed, like, scavenged Kryptonian technology, and they're getting, like, powers from that, and the various, like, agencies don't know how to contain them properly, so they keep breaking out, it's like... the show really is good. I swear. I don't know when this episode is actually going to come out, because I'm actually rather backed up when it comes to reactions, because there was just a thing where Overly Sarcastic Productions and Kutzkazart both decided that they were going to release like several videos in really short succession, and I only upload videos every other day, so so without any further ado, original video is linked in the description if you haven't seen it yet for some reason. Corner video will be leading to my Let's Play of the day, and with all that out of the way, let's get this thing started then, shall we?
This episode is sponsored by World Anvil. Thanks for smuggling the ad copy in inside this cake. If you were to analyze literature from the absolute most broad strokes perspective possible, you might quickly come to the conclusion that most stories are about people who don't want to be wherever they currently are. Whether that's a vague existential malaise, or a highly specific antagonistic threat, or a general I want song, or a hero's journey hitting the consequences for their refusal of the call and getting their home village burned down, most characters get their plot kicked off by wanting to be somewhere that isn't where they are right now.
Yeah, I guess you could. Yeah, I'm just thinking about that, and yeah.
The rare stories where this isn't the case, the hero tends to be uprooted anyway, and then spends the rest of the story wanting to go back to where they started, which conveniently loops right back into not wanting to be where they are right now. Now, this school of broad-scale analysis is fun, reductive, and typically pointless, but today it's going to help us highlight a fun space of stories that are basically this principle boiled down into its purest form. When you want to explore how a character handles being stuck somewhere they really, really don't want to be right now, you might want to put them in a prison break plot.
Of course,
fiction, prisons most commonly appear as locations where villains are non-lethally disposed of and/or break out of to become problems. Their security and impenetrability is commonly bragged of, but usually quickly disproven when the bad guys break out easily and/or repeatedly. Jokes are often made at their expense, and characters might become self-aware of how prisons seem absolutely useless at actually keeping any major villains from being problems.
What is it? I remember... Well, I mean, of course, the first one that comes to mind is obviously Arkham Asylum in with Batman. Though, again, that's an insane asylum, not an actual prison, so I guess the securities on that are slightly different. But then the next thing that comes out of that I remember, I'm trying to remember what it was called. It was a cartoon about the Avengers. I'm forgetting what it was called. But I remember there was one episode that I saw where the prison was shrunk down due to like PIM particles, and it was and they just had the entire prison sitting on a table on the SHIELD helicarrier, and I absolutely loved that visual, because you have this prison full of the absolute worst villains in this world sitting on a table, a literal table surrounded by two guards with guns. I just found that visual really funny. And then you have the actual prison break of that, where I'm forgetting a lot of the characters. It's been a while since I've seen the show, but you have this new villain he's brought in. He doesn't know he's been shrunk down, and he's freaking out. It's like, come on, we got to figure out a way to get out of here. And all the other villains are just completely cool, not doing anything. And he's asking them, like, what's going on? Have you given up? It's like, no. It's just not our time yet. And because, I think the PIM particles wore off or something, and the prison returned to full size inside the helicarrier. And things went bad very quickly, as you might imagine.
While the in-universe Watsonian purpose of these prisons is to detain villains, the Doyleist reason these prisons exist is to both give the heroes a way to get rid of their bad guys without having to do some straight-up extrajudicial murdering about it, and to facilitate a rotating rogues gallery of bad guys to cycle in and out whenever the writer wants to mix up the plot. The prison is basically little more than a villain storage facility, so when the writer wants to bring back an old favorite problem child, they'll just go from being safely imprisoned to effortlessly breaking out in the space of 10 minutes so they can make a nuisance of themselves for a few episodes. Sometimes an extra spicy bad guy will break out only once under extraordinary circumstances and then be defeated for good before being placed back on the shelf for potential future use. Villain prison breaks tend to be quick and painless, usually just serving as an inciting incident for the heroes to respond to.
Granted, I know the reason for the helmet. The Juggernaut's like big dome-shaped helmet is similar to Magneto's, where it's supposed to keep him from being like impervious to like mental manipulation and stuff like that from Xavier. Because I think the Juggernaut, isn't he like Xavier's brother or something? I can't remember. Also, he's not actually a mutant. He was given powers by like some sort of god or something. But yeah, again, such a stupid like shape. I mean, like the bowl goes out to here on his shoulders. How does he like move his shoulders like this with without like the entire thing lifting up and obscuring his face? I don't know. He's the Juggernaut.
However, none of this quick and easiness applies when the heroes are the ones breaking out. The prison break plot is a stock episode format where at least one major character is imprisoned, almost always by an antagonist, and the plot is them escaping, sometimes with outside help.
Antagonists, and also there's a very large possibility that they were framed, or they're in the prison of an evil authoritarian government system of some kind.
Has hefty overlap with both the damsel in distress and the heist plot, kind of a fusion of the two, where the heisted MacGuffin is a character who can play an active role in the proceedings. The core appeal of the prison break plot is the process by which the characters bypass or overcome the prison's security measures before making their clever escape. And while it's a fun thought experiment in isolation, it also presents a unique space of interesting character potential by putting all the characters involved in a very tense situation that automatically casts them as underdogs against an overwhelmingly powerful and dispassionate threat, a situation that most characters are not accustomed to. Because of this, the prison break plot usually works best as an episodic installment of a longer running series, where an established cast of characters the audience is already familiar with plans a breakout or rescue, and the audience gets to see them handle the unique challenges and stressors of the subplot. But it can also work in other contexts, like a character origin, the plot of an action movie, the first third of a bigger action plotline. It can even be a cold open that starts the rest of the story, or how the band gets together before the big adventure. It's a versatile little chestnut, probably because it's basically what you get if you boil down internal character conflict to its absolute most concentrated form. Character doesn't want to be where they are, antagonist wants to keep them where they are, conflict ensues. As a stock episode, the prison break plot has certain elements that very rarely change. The big one is the authority. This is the force keeping our hero or heroes imprisoned. This authority capturing those heroes is the inciting incident for this plot. The authority is usually a vast nebulous force like a government or other legal system, but it'll typically be personified by individual representatives like wardens, someone who can put a face and personality to the otherwise distant and massive antagonistic figure that backs the prison. The authority can be
But the whole fact that they're having the prisoners put the droids together, I mean, that we've seen them have full-scale automated productions. I mean, granted, I know there's like slave labor and you want to keep the prisoners busy so they don't have time to do stuff, but you're making these robots that, you know, I would imagine require advanced tools, or at least more specialized tools that I could very easily imagine being used for other purposes.
A full-blown evil overlord and corresponding evil empire, but it can also be a completely neutral party that's just enforcing its own laws in a way that the heroes don't like, which ties into the second factor, the reason. This is why the authority imprisons the protagonist, and it's usually not given too much focus after the initial inciting incident. Maybe the protagonist unknowingly broke some local law, or very knowingly broke some universal law, or they got unjustly framed by some enemy.
What was I saying?
Can also be something internally villainous, like the authority is innately evil and captured a good guy for being not evil, or gladiator combat is super rad, or prison industrial complex bad, actually. The reason doesn't generally factor into the plot too much. It's not like the heroes will get a chance to disprove it in a court of law or find a reasonable authority figure to help them out if the plot is determined to make a prison break happen, but the reason can sometimes add a ticking clock that the heroes need to work around if it incorporates an authority-mandated time limit, like a public execution or getting shipped off to an even more impenetrable prison. And
I swear, that one scene in Hunchback, out of context, it looks like he's just gonna throw her down.
Then there's the defenses. This is the most
sharks with lasers on their heads.
The story because it's what the heroes are going to need to work around to do the prison break. Wardens, guards, locks, surveillance, controls, laser grids, all of that is here in the problem zone. The defenses are usually touted as impenetrable, and the main challenge for the heroes is going to be figuring out how to penetrate them, either from the outside to break in, or with a bit more difficulty, just from the inside to break out. The defenses are usually where the writer's creativity shines, because they're basically the practical antagonist of the story, and they're what makes the prison interesting.
Thinking back to that whole Tai Lung's escape in Kung Fu Panda. So if I remember correctly, Master Oogway was the one that had the premonition that Tai Lung was going to escape. And Shifu was the one once told that sent the messengers to the messenger to the prison, whose feather was ultimately the thing that allowed for Tai Lung to escape. I have to wonder, with Master Oogway, was it literally just the fact that he got the premonition that he was going to escape and didn't see how? Because if he did, I have to wonder why he didn't stop Shifu from sending him. It's like, no, you're not going to want to do that, actually. I still love that scene. Tai Lung's escaped. It's like, ooh, that is bad news.
Prisons in these stories usually have at least one fantastical gimmick to make it more unique than big locked door. How will your heroes escape if the prison is housed in an active volcano, or the middle of the ocean, or floating in space? What if there are electric floors, or they have to do gladiatorial combat, or it's the entire island of Manhattan? The more buck wild the prison, the more fun it can be to figure.
Again, escaping New York, I've heard of that movie for years. I still have no idea why in universe they turned Manhattan into a prison island. You know what? I might look that up after I do this reaction, because now that I'm looking at it again and being reminded of it, I genuinely want to know.
Figure out how to break it. It's why escape rooms aren't just featureless boxes with number puzzles and combination locks. The gimmicks are what make it fun. There are a couple other elements of the story that are optional depending on the format. One of those is the friends on the outside, any allies that the imprisoned character might have coming to their rescue. This is pretty common, but it's not universal, since some breaks are completely internal with no cavalry on the way, and it can be pretty dramatic, albeit very difficult, to have a character figure out how to break themselves out all on their own when the prison is specifically designed to make that impossible. But in cases where friends on the outside are coming to help, they often end up meeting the imprisoned character halfway, running into them breaking out while they're breaking in. And the other optional element is the friend on the inside, a fellow prisoner who helps out the imprisoned protagonist, usually physically defending them and or teaching them how things work on the inside and any other helpful mentor tidbits they might know. In stories where the prison has a notably complicated gimmick, it's very helpful to have one of these guys around to get the characters and audience up to speed on what exactly is going on. The friend on the inside is usually either a big guy or a wise old mentor, and both of these stock characters have remarkably high fatality rates, so the friend on the inside stands a pretty good chance of dying on the way out, which is tragic and poignant and stuff, and also saves the writer the trouble of figuring out what else to do with them, which is good. Now, like all heist-adjacent plots, the prison break follows the unspoken plan guarantee, which is that thing where if the characters explain their plan on screen, anything the audience sees is guaranteed to be disrupted or get interrupted or otherwise go wrong. But if the characters just say something like, here's what we're gonna do, and then the camera pans out so the audience doesn't see their explanation, then whatever the character's plan has a good chance of success. This is less of a trope and more of a phenomenon that
I can see why. Because, with a lot of things in entertainment, a lot of it comes, at least from the first viewing, of it being unexpected. So if they literally explain what they're going to do, the whole unexpected thing is seeing said plan not come to fruition. And thus, if you don't explain the plan to the audience, the unexpected part of it comes from actually just witnessing the plan go through in general.
It naturally arises from certain elements of storytelling. If the audience has already heard the entire plan, seeing the plan play out as described is going to be redundant for them. But if the audience doesn't have all the information, seeing the plan play out can still be excitingly tense, since the audience doesn't know which parts are planned and which ones aren't. Maybe the mastermind getting captured is the plan going wrong, or maybe it was the plan all along. Maybe one of the characters has gone rogue and sold out the team, or maybe they've coordinated it to look like that so they earn the villain's trust. As long as the audience doesn't know the plan, anything could be the plan. So when a prison break plot is happening, the less the audience knows about the plan, the better chance it has of succeeding.
That was the That was the Avengers show that I was talking about. I can't remember for the life of me what it was called.
We're asked if we get the full rundown of everything there is to know about the prison and exactly how they're going to break in and out, it's pretty much guaranteed that nothing is going to go how it's laid out on paper. Guards will change up their patrol routes, or an unexpected mini-boss will turn up, or it'll turn out that the bad guy knew about the plan all along and took steps to specifically thwart it. Whatever the specifics, if we know the plan is not going to work. It's just a fun quirk of the medium. There are a few common bonus tropes that sometimes get worked into this plot to make things interesting. Most common is the captured on purpose plan. The easiest way to break in, to break somebody out, is to just get the bad guys to do most of the hard work of getting them in the first place. So someone gets captured on purpose, usually with a connection to the outside or a friend disguised as a guard that the bad guys don't know about, or some other leg up they can arrange by controlling the circumstances under which
pretending to be
Villains really like doing this one, but when a bad guy does it, they can get away with having the most absolutely ridiculous contingencies, like somehow having redirected an entire train, or orchestrating it so something blows up at exactly the right time when they had no way of knowing where they would be and when. But that sort of diabolus ex machina privilege is reserved for the bad guys only, and the good guys are lucky if they can get away with a single friend dressed as a guard who doesn't screw up the secret password and get captured immediately. But sometimes the rescue mission goes awry when it turns out the imprisoned character is not just captured. Turns out some other horrible thing has happened to them, like maybe they've been brainwashed or unethically experimented on, or they've even turned to the dark side.
Prequels, no!
To preserve the twist, the imprisoned character is usually not shown during the key parts of the story, which can make this closer to a typical damsel rescue than a proper prison break. For extra angst, sometimes this happens to them because they helped with a different prison escape, and whoever they helped is trying to return the favor, only to find that their rescuer is in even worse straits than before. In the more tragic cases, this can make the whole scenario a Shaggy Dog story where everything they did was pointless, but in most cases it just adds an extra layer of spice and character drama to the rescue. And the grandest scale variant is probably I Said I Break the Prison, where the heroes don't just escape, they prompt a massive prison break where the entire facility is emptied. This basically only happens in cases where the antagonistic force is a cartoonishly evil empire, or the prison is otherwise completely unambiguously awful and there are absolutely no complexities to the conflict, but you do sometimes get cases where the heroes don't break it completely, but they do some kind of prison reform once they get out, like making sure the one nasty warden's awfulness is exposed and the good people trying to run an ethical prison get put in charge. Your mileage may vary on how convincing you find that one. The prison break plot has a lot of moving parts that make it complicated. At the heart of it is the prison itself, which is functionally the antagonist of the entire plot, a hostile location that automatically places the protagonists in the role of underdog. The design of the prison is an opportunity for the writers to get really creative, so while some of them are pretty basic dungeons, some of them get really convoluted and present even more interesting challenges for the characters to solve. This trope really only has two things it's notably good at: an intriguing escape room puzzle box for the setting, and the character writing that this specific kind of stressful situation can facilitate. The imprisoned character or characters are stuck in a tense, arguably hopeless situation with very little control, which is a context that tends to reveal parts of a character that might not otherwise see the light of day. Stress and pressure and desperation can expose a lot of interesting complexities under the surface, and it's always fun to explore how a familiar character handles a new and unfamiliar situation. As a side effect of the odds being completely stacked against them, characters in this plotline might be driven to temporarily team up with characters they were previously at odds with, maybe even characters that are responsible for them being imprisoned in the first place, or vice versa, which can even kick off a full-on redemption arc if the team-up goes notably well. And the process of breaking the prison requires that the characters be clever, coordinated, sneaky, and subtle, which in more action-heavy stories can be a rare treat, and it's always fun to follow along with characters that are being smart, even if it can take a lot of work to write convincingly. The main difficulty with these stories is actually a little bit hard to spot. The thing is, prison break stories are usually good at least one of the two main factors of the story, the clever escape or the fun character moments, and if it's notably good at one of those things, it can get a little hand-wavy with the other. A prison break plot that gets really deep into exploring how the characters handle the imprisonment, the breakout, or the rescue can be fun to watch even if the prison is just a garden-variety dungeon with a locked door, and the actual breakout process is just a matter of knocking out guards and picking locks. And a really complicated prison with a ton of impenetrable defenses and wacky gimmicks can make for a very fun escape plot, even if the actual characters are basically just puzzle-solving machines perfectly executing their clever escape. Sometimes a story nails both elements, and you get a really good prison break where the prison itself is interesting and the character arcs are fascinating to watch. But sometimes these stories get a little bit wobbly in places, and it usually happens for the same reason all clever plan plots get wobbly: the simple fact that figuring out a genius plan is a tall order for a writer to pull off.
That's kind of the problem there. To be, you generally need to be smarter than people to figure out, smart problems. And generally, stuff like prisons are not designed by one person. I'm trying to remember. Again, it was another cartoon, but this one was. it was based off of Injustice, you know, the DC stories where Superman goes crazy and evil because the Joker tricked him into killing Lois Lane while she was pregnant with his son. As part of the show, they had built like a super prison for all of the super powered beings and placed it at the bottom of the ocean. And they needed to get one prisoner out because I think he could make like boom tubes or something. It's been a while. I've only ever actually seen the clips on YouTube, if I may be completely honest here. But the one person that they needed to do this prison break was Plastic Man, because he could just turn his finger into a key and stick it into the lock to unlock the door. Or, you know, to thin out his hand and stick it in between the door to fiddle around with the mechanisms inside. And, you know, or he could just squeeze in between cracks because he's Plastic Man. He's basically Mr. Fantastic put up to 11. No, he's Mr. Fantastic if he was turned up to 11 and you threw in a good smattering of Looney Tunes physics as well. You have the super prison, super prison, and then you just needed the one guy to break out of it. And of course it was Batman who found him. Well, not really found him, but figured out that Plastic Man was pretending to be one of the chairs in their secret hideout. I'm definitely gonna have to find that clip, if I can remember what it was called.
There's only one hero not allied with Superman who has the powers to get there.
And where might he or she be, Batsy?
He's been hiding here for days.
Ah, you knew?
Huh?
And you didn't even offer me any jerky? Hey, ladies.
We're gonna lose so hard.
There's a rule of thumb when writing mysteries that the writer always needs to know the solution before they start writing anything else. And it's not just so the whole thing actually makes sense and is fair to the audience. It's also just way easier for the writer to work backwards from the solution to construct the problem than it is to try and solve the problem from scratch. Not to mention that if you make a problem from scratch and then try to derive the solution, there's no guarantee that the problem even has a solution. The number one way to guarantee that a mystery can be solved is to start from the solution and then construct the mystery backwards. And Prison Break design is kind of in the same boat. Except not really. You can start with the prison and all its wacky gimmicks and try to figure out how it can be escaped, which is a fun thought experiment that a lot of people have a lot of fun with, speculating over how different security measures could be bypassed. And because a prison is not a problem designed to have a solution, this makes a lot of sense. But a lot of the time, it's just easier to start with the solution and work backwards. If you want the heroes to escape through the air vents need to be imperfectly guarded. If you want them to short out the
or just stupidly big.
The electrical system needs to be improperly insulated. If you want them to impersonate guards, the guards need to be bad enough at their jobs that they can ambush them and take their stuff. And while this makes for a cleaner, simpler solution, it undercuts the structure of the prison by building in a weakness for the characters to exploit. And the more obvious the solution, the less it makes sense that the prison design didn't account for it. Unlike mysteries, puzzles, and good escape room praxis, when writing a Prison Break plotline, the best results usually come from stories that don't have the solution baked into the design. There's a fundamental difference between a character uncovering an inobvious solution that has always been there, like a detective solving a mystery, and a character piecing together a solution from a bunch of disparate elements that have never been combined in that way before. The first makes a good mystery, the second makes a good Prison Break. So, yeah. And thanks.
Again, it's something that I love seeing in all of these trope talks, and it's how simultaneously you can have these tropes that can be seen in like hundreds, if not thousands, of different pieces of media, and yet how they can be simultaneously so simple on the outside when you just talk about them, but then to actually do them properly, you get into an absolute quagmire of just a million intricacies that can like basically like feed off of and change one another if you do one thing different or one thing or whatever. I love this kind of stuff. I have tried doing writing a few times in the past. I've never gotten that far because I'm very much the kind of person that will come up with an idea, but as soon as I try to actually make it, that spark has a very hard time catching, and I have a very hard time fleshing it out. But yeah, it's stuff like this that like it keeps that little ember alive for me to try to like, you know, hopefully I'll actually make an actual story someday and like put it out, whether just online and just finish it. But yeah. Another wonderful episode off on the books. So yeah. Original video is linked in the description if you haven't seen it for some reason. Corner video will lead to my newest Let's Play. And with all that out of the way, I hope you guys liked. If you did, leave a like, subscribe if you have not. And I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.